Thank you so much for coming to another video if you're here. And also thank you if you watched a prior video to this one, which was on Windows command line tools. And for this video, we're actually going to do some administering and deploying some endpoint protection. Our objectives is to do a few things: create an endpoint protection site system role, figure some alerts, some definition updates, some anti-malware policies, some custom client settings for endpoint protection, and also provisioning some endpoint protection client on a disk image as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the first exercise. All right, so first what we're going to do is install an endpoint protection site system. So it has to be installed on any one site system server, right? So I'm going to install that, and then I'm going to place it at the top of a standalone primary site. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the configuration manager, and we're going to take a look at some admin workspace here, and then our site configuration. We're going to take a look at the site servers and site system roles. Of course, we're going to click here. It looks like there's already one here. And we're going to add, of course. All right. So here, everything looks pretty good. We're going to do next. This is good. Right. And then, of course, we want to select endpoint protection. Okay, perfect. All right, and of course we accept. All right, and we don't want to join maps. Right. Okay, we're just finishing up, and it has, as it shows here, successfully completed. As far as the endpoint site system role is now added to the primary site, right? So now what we're going to do for the next task is configure the alerts for the endpoint protection, which is going to inform the admin or yourself, in this case, for myself, when specific events such as malware malfunctioning has occurred. So I'm just going to configure those alerts here. So I'm going to actually take a look at our assets and compliance, take a look at our devices. Let's see, device collections here. All right, perfect. So let's take a look at all systems, not just a few. We're going to take a look at our properties, do those configurations. So naturally, we're going to head to our alerts, and we're going to add those alerts. And then we want, let's see, want all of these really for endpoint protection. Just reading them over. All right, perfect. Now, of course, we want to apply. And now we want to take a look at our monitoring, of course. Let's see. Close this out. I forgot to press OK there. Let's take a look at our monitoring. It didn't allow me to click. Then we're going to take a look at our alerts. Let's open that up. I want to take a look at all of our alerts, right, going forward. So now what we're going to do is we're going to configure the definition update for the endpoint protection, right? So actually, and I went to the alerts just to show all the alerts that were created from the last configuration that we did from setting up that endpoint protection. So now we're just going to take a look at our software library. We're going to take a look at our updates here, automatic deployment. We want to create a new rule. All right. We're going to name this ADR endpoint protection. Okay, perfect. And then here, if I can spell. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's take a look at our templates here. We want the definition updates. All right, perfect. And then we also want to take a look at our collections here. Of course, naturally, we want all our systems to be good to go. All right, perfect. And now let's take a look at our next page. All right, and this is good. Let's see here. Just take a look at these filters. All right, these are good. All right, perfect. Now for our evaluation schedule, we don't want to, we wanted to run the rule after any software update point synchronization, which is good. All right, so perfect. So the time, right? So the time we want it based on the client local time. So everyone, is not confused being on a different time zone, right? If it's, especially if you have a large enterprise that spans across multiple time zones. And then we want it done as soon as possible, as far as enabling the deployment before the software updates are available. All right, and I'm going to go next. All right, now for our user experience, right? For user notifications, we want to keep it hidden as far as the software and all notifications, something like this as far as a pop-up, right? And we want to make sure to suppress the system restart on the servers and the workstations, right? So we're good there. All right. Now these are good as far as our alerts. And we're actually going to do some more configuration around those alerts a little bit later on. Now, as far as our download settings, everything else, deployment options, those look pretty good. All right. Now for these, we can actually create a new deployment package. So let me actually do that here. Okay, we're going to name it that. And we're going to want this to our other server, which is our main server at the top here. Endpoint definition. Perfect. All right, so we got that taken care of. Everything looks good. Just making sure everything is spelled out right. EPD, and we are good to go here, right? And naturally, we're going to add, right? Because there's nothing there as far as the filter. We want to do a distribution point, and we will naturally we're going to add the only one that's here, right? Our current server that we're currently located on. So we can head out to the next menu. And now for the download location, right, we wanted to download software updates from the internet naturally, right? And next, naturally, I only speak English, at least at the moment. I'm learning a couple more, but right now I just speak English, so I'll leave it there. All right, perfect. The summary is good. Now we got our status, and the process looks complete. Perfect. All right, so we're good there. So now we can actually see the automatic deployment rule that was created for configuring the updates for the endpoint protection. That allows us to move on to our next exercise, which is going to be creating and deploying anti-malware policies for the endpoint protection. So it's going to allow us, at least the configuration manager, to deploy these policies and specify how the endpoint protection can protect us or these devices from malware and other threats. So we can actually include information about scan schedule, the actions to take place when the malware is actually detected, and then the types of files and folders to actually scan in the anti-malware policy setting. So I'm actually going to take a look again at the assets and compliance, and we're going to take a look at our endpoint protection and our anti-malware policies naturally, right? We're going to actually, let me go back here. Yeah, we're going to create a new one here. All right, so let's actually name it endpoint anti-malware. Okay, perfect. And we're going to, of course, check off all of the necessary boxes. All right, perfect. And scheduling. I want to make sure we're able to schedule our scans as well. So let's see. Scan day, that looks pretty okay. It looks pretty good. Now for our scan settings. This is pretty good. Right, now for default. Now we can, for this one here, we can just specify how the endpoint protection responds to threats based on the given recommended response. But I'll just leave everything at default because as you can see, we can do it from quarantine, recommended, remove. But I'll again, because it's a lab, I'll just leave it as is. So let's take a look at the exclusion. And we can see here, we can actually specify the path of the files and folders to exclude from the protection scan specific but I'll keep everything as is. Let's take a look at our advanced. We specify the advanced settings as you can see here. And for our threat overrides, we can customize the remedial action to take for each threat ID when detected during a scan. And again, I'll leave everything as is. And let's take a look here. All right, so this is fine. Do not join maps, and no for allowing users to modify. Let's take a look at our definition updates. Again, I'm just scrolling through to make sure everything is fine, but for the most part, the default settings are pretty okay for the lab setting that we have here. But nonetheless, we do see the newly created anti-malware policy listed in our anti-malware policies page. So now let's actually take a look here. Then we can deploy the policy that we just created. And naturally, we want all of our systems, right? Not just a few, to be protected properly. All right, and this allows us to move on to our next exercise, which is going to be, which is configuring the custom client settings for the endpoint protection. So I'm just going to deploy these settings to a collection of computers in the hierarchy. And I'm just going to swivel back over to administration. We can take a look at our client settings here. All right, and we're going to create a new group. Should make that here. Right. Perfect. And we want it to be client settings for endpoint. Naturally, right? Okay, and of course we want our endpoint protection to be selected. Now let's take a look at our endpoint protection here. Right. All right, so let's see here. Yeah, we want that taken care of. Everything else is okay. All right, so now we can see the newly created client device settings listed, and we can actually deploy it to the appropriate collections here. Naturally, all systems, right? Perfect. And actually take a look at the deployments here at the bottom, right? So we can take a look at the collection for which the client setting was deployed. Naturally, it's going to show all systems here for our collection. But nonetheless, this moves us to our final exercise, which is provisioning the endpoint protection. Now we see how to provision the endpoint protection client on a computer that's to be used as a disk image source for configuration, for the configuration managing operating system deployment. So this computer is referred to as the reference computer, right? So which is sys01, right? So I'm just going to show how to install the endpoint protection client locally from a command prompt using the install file that I'm going to use here in a second. So let me actually open up the command here. Install it. Naturally, want to run it. It's the admin. Okay, perfect. I'm going to type the command here. I'll be as quick as I can. Okay, perfect. Now we're in. So now I'm just going to enter in here. Perfect. All right, so the endpoint protection client install complete successfully. So the client's going to perform the definition update check automatically, right? So now we're going to verify the endpoint protection client install. So let's actually take a look here. Take a look here. So take a look at the PC status. Should open up here in a second. So you can watch the, it's really the System Center endpoint protection. Where did it go? There it is. All right, perfect. I'm actually going to take a look at the update here first. I mean, everything looks good to go, right? Got a real-time protection. Should be on. Take a look here. Update. More than likely, because of the nature of the lab, there may be a bug of some sort. But nonetheless, we did not receive an error when we provided the install for the protection here. So naturally, in a real world scenario, it would be successfully running along with the endpoints that we set up the protections earlier as far as the configuration console, the configuration manager. But nonetheless, that brings us to the end of this video, where we, again, just for a brief recap, we administered and deployed endpoint protections. We created an endpoint protection site system role, configured alerts for endpoint protection, configured definition updates. For that protection, created and deployed anti-malware policies, configure custom client settings, and provision the endpoint protection client on a reference computer, which is sys01 in this case. Thank you so much for watching. Now that we reached to the end of the video, if you're still here, thank you again. And on the next video, we should have even more fun, where we'll be looking at a BitLocker on portable media. We'll see you there. Stay curious, stay secure.